Okay, Rabotai. Erev Shabbat Shalom. Double parasha this week. Chukat Balak. A lot going on happens to be. A lot of information. The shiur is Liwi Nishmat Michael Bat Ben Ilanit. Baruch Hashem Terechinu Megan Eden. So like I said before, the parasha is jam-packed. We have all the way from Moshe Rabbeinu hitting the rock, the famous story with Bilam, Balak, and the end of the parasha with Pinhas. I decided, however, not to focus on those things. Something that's a little less spoken about amongst the Hachamim, but nonetheless, the lesson is incredible. If you look at the very first source, first pasuk in this week's parasha, "Vaydaber Hashem el Moshe lemor, ve'el Aaron lemor, zot chukat Torah asher tziva Hashem lemor, daber el bnei Yisrael v'yichul elecha para aduma temima, asher ein ba mum, asher lo ale aleha ol." Talking about para aduma, famous mitzvah that we know, that when a person becomes tameh, they take the para aduma, they burn it, mix the ashes with water, and they sprinkle it on the person who became tameh. Now, there's a very interesting Midrash Tanhuma that tells us a behind-the-scenes conversation that Moshe Rabbeinu had with Hashem when he went up to Shamayim. Look inside source number 2, Midrash Tanhuma. Says the source, Bisha'ah Sha'ala Moshe Lamarom. At the time of Moshe Rabbeinu, he went up to heaven. Shama kolo shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu yoshev ve'osek beparasha para aduma. Oh, he found Hashem, and Hashem was learning in parasha para aduma, this week's parasha. What was he saying? Ve'omer halacha b'shem omra. And Hashem was saying halacha in the name of its rabbi. Rabbi Eliezer b'ni Omer. Rabbi Eliezer, my son, he says, Egla bat shinata upara bat shetayim. That when you have Egla Arufa, and you have Para Aduma, the minimum age for these things, the Egla Arufa has to be 1 year old, and the Para Aduma has to be 2 years old. Amar Moshe lefanab. So Hashem tells Hashem, Rabbanu Shalom, Helyonim v'atachtonim shelcha. Hashem, you control everything. V'ata omer halacha b'shmo shel basar v'dam, and you're saying halacha in the name of basar v'dam, in the name of human beings. How could it be that Hashem is in control of everything, and He knows everything, He knows everything we're going to do, and yet He's quoting a halacha in the name of a rabbi that lives down on earth? You know what it's like almost, Rabbi Lahavdil, if I had to give it an example, Lahavdil, imagine if you have the CEO of Amazon, Jeff Bezos. Imagine he comes along, he's having a board meeting with all the managers and all the higher ups, and he says, you know what, Rabotai, I had a good idea. I heard that the janitors were talking, and they said that we shouldn't invest too much money in Amazon-made products. Instead, we should invest in our third-party investors and our third-party sellers. And they say, what are you talking about? Why would you take business advice from janitors? You know what, I like them, they clean the cafeteria, they do a good job. Lahavdil, that's what it's like. That Hashem, He's quoting halacha in the name of a rabbi, and Moshe says, I'm shocked, Hashem, how could you be quoting a halacha in the name of Basar Badam? Midrash continues, there's going to be a tzaddik one day that's going to stand up in earth. And he's going to be Doresh in Parasha Para Aduma. Rabbi Eliezer Omer Egla bat shinatao para bat shtayim. If that's the case, you're going to have this big tzaddik that's going to come out, and he's going to give drasha on this parasha. Says Moshe Rabbeinu, I pray that this tzaddik is going to come from me. So Hashem tells him, that he's going to come from your zera, from your descendants. Says the pasuk, Eliezer. Moshe Rabbeinu, he gave birth to a son, and then that son, his name was Eliezer. Rabotai, what is going on with this midrash? Number one, what's so special about Rabbi Eliezer that Moshe Rabbeinu asked Hashem that he should come from his zera, that Rabbi Eliezer should be from the descendants of Moshe Rabbeinu? And number two, what's the connection between Rabbi Eliezer and Eliezer ben Moshe? Just because his name is Rabbi Eliezer, therefore the Midrash quotes at the end that Moshe Rabbeinu, wanting to have a descendant like Rabbi Eliezer, says, I'm going to name my son also Eliezer. What's the connection between Rabbi Eliezer, the Tanah of the Mishnah, and Eliezer, the son of Moshe Rabbeinu? Not only that, the biggest question on this Midrash is the following. I didn't quote you the whole Midrash, the whole Mishnah. The whole Mishnah, it says, if you look in source number 3, it's the Mishnah in Parah, Perek Aleph, Mishnah Aleph. Says the Mishnah, Rabbi Eliezer Omer, Egla bat shinata, Egla Rufa, 1 year old, Upara bat shtayim. That's the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer. However, Chachamim Omrim, Egla bat shetayim. According to the rabbis, they argue with Rabbi Eliezer. It's not really 1 year old, it has to be 2 years old. Upara, and the Para Aduma, bat shalosh or bat arba, has to be at least 3 or 4 years old. Says the Rambam, in this halakha, source number 4, Mitzvah Para Aduma, shitiyeh bat shalosh shanim, or bat arba. So the Rambam was supposed to say halakha lemaaseh like the Chachamim. So Hashem, why are you quoting halakha in the name of Rabbi Eliezer if that's not really halakha lemaaseh? Go back to my mashal. Imagine if Jeff Bezos, he suggests to the board members that we should follow the janitors, and the board members, they tell him, but Jeff Bezos, the janitors are wrong. You should not invest in third-party sellers. You should invest in Amazon's company. This way we'll be able to sell products. We'll make products 10 cents on the dollar, and we'll sell them for 80% markup. The janitors are wrong. Therefore, what is Hashem quoting halakha in the name of Rabbi Eliezer if that's not the halakha l'maaseh? Rabotai, do you understand my three questions? Question number one. What's so special about Rabbi Eliezer that Moshe Rabbeinu wanted him to come out from his descendants? Question number two, what is the connection that the Midrash has to quote me that Moshe Rabbeinu had a son called Eliezer, and the Mishnah makes the correlation between Rabbi Eliezer and Eliezer the son of Moshe? And the last question, why is Hashem quoting halakha in the name of Rabbi Eliezer if halakha is not like him? In fact, halakha is like the Chachamim. Is that clear, Rabotai? Yeah? I'm looking at blank faces. Is three questions clear? Now, just to open up the sugya a little bit, just to open up before we continue. If you look in Berachot, in the very first Mishnah, very first page in Shas, Rabbi Eliezer is actually the very first opinion that's quoted in Shas. If you look at source number 5, Gemara Barachot Daf Bet, says the Gemara, Me'ematai konit shema be'arvit. When is the correct time to read Shema at nighttime? Misha shokonim nichnasim lo'ocheh b'trumatan. At the time the Kohanim, they eat the Truma. Atzof hashmona rishona. Until the last Shmona, whatever the halacha means. Who says this? Divrei Rabbi Eliezer. So Rabbi Eliezer, our Rabbi Eliezer ben Horkanus, he is the rabbi that's quoted first in the Mishnah Barachot. The question is, Rabbi, who is the redactor of the Mishnah, he wrote the Mishnayot. So why did he decide to quote Rabbi Eliezer ben Horkanus, the first, starting off the entire Shas? So if you look at a rabbi called Tzlach, Tzlach is the Tziyun, the Nevesh Hayab, the Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yechazkel Landau. He says in source number 6, Nireli, Sherabbenu HaKadosh Ratzad Lasod Nachar Ruach LeMoshe Rabbeinu. Rabbi, he wanted to give pleasure. He wanted to make Moshe Rabbeinu happy, and therefore he quotes Rabbi Eliezer first. Skip down to the very last line of that of the Tzlach, and he says, "V'lachein nitkaven Rabbeinu HaKadosh latchil Torah b'shebe'al peh b'nishat Rabbi Eliezer." So therefore, Rabbi decided to quote Rabbi Eliezer the first opinion in the Mishnah, Sheyatza miyotzei halatzav shel Moshe Rabbeinu, because Moshe Rabbeinu requested in this Midrash Tanchuma that he wanted Rabbi Eliezer to come out of him. Therefore, Rabbi, in order to give nachat ruach to Moshe Rabbeinu, he decided to quote Rabbi Eliezer first. Again, this is my last question, Rabotai. So what? You think it really made Moshe Rabbeinu happy that Rabbi Eliezer was quoted first in the Mishnah? We're not first graders over here. You know, in camp, when they offer, who wants pizza? What does everybody say? Me first, me first, me first. Anybody who wants to play basketball? Me first, me first, me first. Is Moshe Rabbeinu a 2-year-old child that wants me first, me first? So therefore, what's the connection that Rabbi, who's the redactor of the Mishnah, decides to quote Rabbi Eliezer as the first rabbi in the Mishnah because Moshe Rabbeinu prayed to Hashem that he should come out of his descendants? Ma kesher one to the other. Rabbi, do we understand all the questions? Hazak Baruch. Now, we continue. The very first source that we begin is source number 7. We all know the story. Background. Abraham. He has his nephew Lot that was captured in war. Right? The war between the 4 kings and the 5 kings. The king who captured him was a king by the name of Nimrod, aka Amraphel. Amraphel, he captures Lot. He decided that, you know what, he's going to make a fool of Abraham. At the end of the day, Abraham and Lot, they were spitting images of each other. They looked like twins. And Nimrod, wanting to create a Chilul Hashem, captured Lot and telling everybody that, look, I captured Abraham Avinu. So Abraham, he cannot let this disgrace to Hashem go unaccounted for. Therefore, he decides to muster up all his men in his army and go and fight Nimrod in the 4 kings and the 5 kings. Says the pasuk in Bereshit, "Vayishma Abraham ki nishba achiv." Abraham hears that his nephew, that his brother was captured. So he gathers 318 soldiers and he chases after these 4 kings in a place called Dan. Says Rashi, Rabbeinu Amru, Gemara Deraim, Eliezer levado hayab. It wasn't 318 soldiers, really it was just Eliezer, his servant by himself. V'hu minyan Gematria shel shemo. And Eliezer, the Gematria, equals 318. That's why the Torah goes out of its way to tell me that the soldiers of Abraham was 318, because really it wasn't soldiers, it was really just Eliezer, and the Gematria of Eliezer's name is 318. What is so special about the number 318? So look at source number 8. This is Rabbi Tzadok HaKohen Milublin, B'divrei Sofrim. He comes along and he says, Hatam shelakach imo Abraham dafka shin yud chet, which is 318, Yilidei Beito, or just Eliezer, which is Gematria shin yud chet. Here we go. This is the key line. Ki milat yeush Ola bigematria shin yud zayin, because the word Yeush, which literally means to give up, to despair, to become despondent, it equals in Gematria 317. Oh, therefore it says Rabbi Tzadok, Nimtza, Kisiach 318, Shu Echad Yotem Mitibat Yeush. 318 is one more number more than 317. Romez Lidgabrut Adam Aklipat Yeush. This is in order to signify that anybody who has the power over Yeush, anybody who wants to have the power over Yeush, he has to connect with this number of 318. If you have the number 318, it's known that you have one more number over Yeush, which is despondency, which is to become hopeless. Therefore, you conquer this characteristic trait called despondency, to become to give up, so to speak. And therefore, that's why Abraham specifically chose Eliezer to come with him, because Eliezer is 318. 318 is one number more than Yeush. Says Rabbi Tzadok, Hine, Kikezo in Yach Lekach Imo Shinu D'Chad Yildei Beito, or Eliezer. That's the reason why Abraham specifically took Eliezer. Why? The Ramez. Ki af heyoto mi'ut, even though Abraham Avinu, again, Abraham Avinu, Lavdil, he's not Rambo. Abraham in this war, he's the underdog. He's not a one-man army. He's coming, and I can imagine each king brought an army of soldiers with him. And comes Abraham with a mi'ut, by the way. He came with just Eliezer. It's two men fighting against an entire kingdom. And you could think Abraham, listen, at the end of the day, Abraham could say, listen, I could give up. Lot, it was very nice to know you, but B'ezrat Hashem, I'll say Kaddish for you on your yard site. I'll get Aliyah to the Torah, I'll say Hashkaba, and everything's going to be fine. That's what Abraham could have said. He could have given up and said, listen, it's not my fight. At the end of the day, he took my nephew. I can't fight him, and therefore, Shalom Yisrael. So he says to say Kaddish. But Abraham, he overcame this midah of Yeush. He overcame this midah of just giving up, and he said, I must take with me Eliezer, because Eliezer represents this midah of overcoming a person's despondency. Says Rabbi Tzadok, and he ends off, at the end of the day, he overcame this midah of Yeush. He overcame this midah of Yeush, and he ended up fighting against the four malachim, the four kings, and he ended up winning. For Eliezer, he represents the power over despair, and he had the perfect role model, Rabotai. Who was Eliezer role model? Eliezer Abraham. Who was his role model? Who did he look up to? He looked up to Abraham Avinu. He learned not to be despondent from his master, from Abraham. Says the very next paragraph in Rabbi Tzadok, V'zeu she'amar Hanavi, Hibitu el Abraham abichem el Saratu lechem. The person when he looks forward to something, he should look towards Abraham and Sarah. Why? Shezachu libnot sharsheret hadorot ayidei shitgabru al klipat Yeush, because they were zocheh. They merited to build generations upon generations, because they did not let Yeush, they did not let despondency, they did not let giving up get in their way. Why? What happened? Says the Rabbi, person has to be strong when he's presented with challenges. Even when a person has a sword on his neck, there's no such thing as giving up. Hashem will save me at the last minute. Abraham Avinu and Sarah, they went through tremendous pain. I had a very good friend of mine that I learned with in Yeshiva in Brooklyn. This guy didn't have children for 17 years. 17 years, and he was in pain. He was walking around as if a dark cloud was always around him, and he never gave up hope. With Emunah and Hashem, the man ended up having triplet girls, and right after that, he had another two boys after that. Tremendous emunah in Hashem, and that was only after 17 years. Imagine Abraham and Sarah; they are suffering from decades upon decades with no children, and they could have said, "Listen, it's not in the cards. At the end of the day, I'm not having kids. I must accept the fact that I'm not having kids, and look on the bright side. My house will be clean. I don't have to pay tuition. A lot of positives in not having kids at the end of the day." But that's not what they said. They said, "You know what? We're not going to give up. At the end of the day, we're going to have emunah in Hashem, and whatever Hashem wants." No Yeush, no such thing as going through as giving up, no such thing as being despondent, and therefore they pushed through, and because of that, they ended up having children, and that's what Eliezer, Ebed Abraham, that's where he learned it from. He learned it because he saw Abraham and Sarah for many years, even though they had all the reason to give up. They're like, you know what, we're going to continue fighting the good fight. We had emunah in Hashem, and that continued. And Rabotai, you could explain with this that Abraham Avinu knew this. Abraham Avinu knew that Eliezer, Eved Abraham, his servant, would go through many trials and tribulations in his life. And therefore he decided to give him an extra boost of power, that Eliezer doesn't fail in these trials and tribulations. He decided, I'm going to call him Dafka, the word Eliezer, because Eliezer is Gematria 318, and 318 is one number over Yeush, which is 317. Like we learned in last week's class, by the way, we learned that a person's name has an effect, has an influence on him. Just to recap very quickly what we said last week, we said that we asked the question by the Khatam Sofer. Khatam Sofer asks, why did the father of Korach, named him Dafka Korach. At the end of the day, Korach, Aluf Korach, is one of the names of Esav's grandchildren. He was a Rasha. So why would Korach be called after the name of a Rasha? And the way we explained it was because Korach, he ended up finding one of the treasures of Yosef HaTzadik that he hid in Egypt. And that treasure made him very rich. And money has an effect on people that when they get a lot of money, all of a sudden the sky becomes to get dim. They lose their straight and narrow path. They get blinded by the money. And in order for Korach not to be blinded, his forefathers, they named him Dafka Korach. Korach, which comes to the word Kireach, which means bald. That they try to tell Korach, listen, even though you can have a lot of money, act like you don't have any money. Hair represents extra money. And therefore, when a person is bald, when a person shaves off his hair, which is exactly what the Levi'im did, it represented that we don't want the money to have an effect on us. That's why Korach had Dafka the name Korach, because Korach is the name Kireach, which means bald. At the end of the day, it didn't work, because since he was named after Rasha, the name of the Rasha had a bigger influence on Korach than the Kavanah of Bnei Levi. And that's why he explained a very famous Gemara. The Gemara says, the one time Rabbi Meir, he was walking with his colleagues and he came to a hotel. And when they got to the hotel, they didn't have safes like they have today in each one of the rooms. No, you gave it to the concierge in the beginning. There he had the safe. So they come to the hotel, and the guy behind the concierge, he says, "Rabbis, would you like to leave your wallets with me?" They say, "Absolutely." And they give them their wallets. But Rabbi Meir, he didn't give his wallet. He says, "I'm not going to give my wallet to this guy." And the next day, they come back and say, "Okay, well, we want to check out. Please give us our money." Lo hayu devrim me'olam. There was no such thing. You never give me anything. The guy ended up robbing the rabbis blind. They look at Rabbi Meir and they said, "Rabbi Meir, you're a prophet." He said, "I'm not a prophet." Rabbi Meir was an expert at reading names. When he came to the concierge and he saw the guy said, "Hello, my name is Kidor." The name Kidor. So what is the name Kidor? Said Rabbi Meir, he quoted the pasuk. Pasuk says, "Kidor ta'bohod heima banim lo yimun bam." That when a person has the name Kidor, it connotes negativity. It quotes that this person has no emunah. You cannot trust this guy. Therefore, since I saw that his name was Kidor, I said, you know what? I can't trust the guy with the name Kidor. It says there, Kut Shemoni, that if the generation would be Zocheh, if we had merit, then Hashem would be able to, based on a person's name, he would be able to know all the guy's characteristic. You see a guy, the guy's name is Eitan, you know that Eitan in Hebrew means strong. So, the guy must be strong. You see a guy that his name is Yafeh, you know that he has beautiful traits, whatever, etc., etc. So therefore, Abraham, he knew that a person's name has an influence, and therefore he knew that one day Rabbi Eliezer, not Rabbi Eliezer, but Eliezer Abraham, he would go through these difficult tests in life, which we will discuss in a minute. And therefore he decided to name Eliezer Dafka Eliezer in order for his name to have influence upon him. Eliezer is Gematria 313, which is one more than the Gematria of Yeush, which is 317. Now, in what situation did Abraham actually name Eliezer? I wasn't aware that Abraham named Eliezer. But the truth is, we all know there's a halakha. Halakha that says that when a person has a baby boy, at the end of 8 days, he must give that baby a brit milah. That's a well-known halakha. However, what you don't know is that not only when a person has a baby boy born to him, but anybody in the guy's household. Meaning to say that even if the guy has, let's say, a slave, and the slave gave birth to a baby, that baby must come under the mitzvah of circumcision by the owner of the house. I'll read you the pasuk inside. See the pasuk in source number 9. It says the Torah, Uben Shmonat Yamim Yemol Lechem Kol Zachar Ledorotechem. All the children must have a circumcision. Says the pasuk, Yilid Bayit, anybody that's born in your house, Umiknat Kesef, anybody that you buy. Kol Benechad. Says the Rashi on that spot, Yilid Bayit. What does it mean when the Torah says Yilid Bayit? Says the Rashi, Shilidato Hashivcha B'Bayit. Let's say you had a maidservant, and that maidservant gave birth to a baby boy. You have an obligation, Mimena Torah, to give her some circumcision to that child. Not only that, says the Rashi, Umiknat Kesef. Let's say, says the Rashi, Shikanu Shemishan Allah. Let's say you bought a child when he was already born, and that child has no circumcision, you have a mitzvah to give that baby a brit milah. Now, Rabotai, what happens after a person gives a baby a brit milah? What's the next step? You name him. You name him. Exactly. So after Abraham, I assumed he followed what it says in the Torah. So I could assume that Abraham, he gave a Brit Milah to Eliezer. And after he gave him the Brit Milah, he named him specifically Eliezer. To give him that extra koach to say, Eliezer, you will one day face very difficult tasks in your life. Therefore, I'm giving you the name Eliezer that represents a person that does not get stuck in Yeush, does not give up in certain situations. Therefore, I'm giving you that name to give you an extra boost. In what situation am I referring to that Eliezer was challenged? Look in the very next source, in source number 10. Says Bereshit, we know the background story at least, that Abraham, he's not looking for a wife for his son Yitzchak, and he employs his trusty servant Eliezer to go find him a wife for Yitzchak. So before Eliezer goes to find the wife, he challenges Abraham, and he says to him in source number 10, Bereshit Chav Daled Lametet, Ve'omer, He tells Abraham, this is Eliezer talking, Eladuni, Ulai lo telech hayisha acharai. Maybe when I find the right wife for Yitzhak, maybe she will not go. Maybe she will not follow me. Says Rashi, what did Eliezer mean? Elai ketiv. In the Torah, it doesn't say the words ve'omer eladuni ulai. It doesn't say the words ulai, maybe. It says the words Elai. What was Eliezer hinting to Abraham when he said the words Elai? Says Rashi, Bat haita lo le'Eliezer. Eliezer had a daughter. V'haya mechazer limtzo alecha shomer lo Abraham lifnot elav l'hasyo bito. Amar lo Abraham. So therefore what happens? Eliezer, he actually suggested a shidduch to Abraham. Abraham, why do I have to go so far to find a wife for Yitzhak? I have a daughter. And you know my daughter is a tzaddiket. I grew up in your house. Everything that I'm doing is for you the whole time. Therefore, why should I go so far to travel to find a wife for Yitzhak? I have a daughter. My daughter is perfect age, perfect marrying age. Says Abraham, says Rashi. Listen to the language of Rashi. Amar lo Abraham, Beni Baruch. My son is blessed. Ve'ata arur, and you are cursed. Ve'en arur midabek bebaruch. And a cursed man cannot attach himself to a blessed man. Wow, what a sharp language used Abraham. Imagine Rabotai lahavdil. Imagine you're working for somebody for 40 years, 50 years you're working for the guy. You come to your boss at the end of before the holidays, you say, boss, I've been working here for a long time. Maybe it's time for a raise. Your boss looks at you and goes, you want a raise? You're worthless, you're a bum, you don't deserve nothing. Imagine how that guy would feel. I mean, listen, all I wanted was a little more than minimum wage. This guy's ripping on me for asking for a raise. This is what Eliezer could have felt. He could have said, listen, Abraham, what am I asking for at the end of the day? I am your most trustworthy servant. I'm only asking for you to marry my daughter. And you see that it's a perfect match. My daughter is a tzaddik. Yitzhak is a tzaddik. Why not? Eliezer could have felt slighted and he could have just given up hope. Listen, at the end of the day, what do I need to work for a boss that calls me arur? Therefore, he could have given up and said, you know what, forget about it. However, he employed his name Eliezer. He went and said, you know what, there's no despondency, those are things you're giving up. And therefore, he went and he fulfilled his mission and he ended up finding a wife for Yitzhak. And she ended up marrying, and we obviously know that that person was Rivka. And it wasn't just only, by the way, I want to tell you a secret, Rabotai. It wasn't only that he just helped himself and he helped his own situation. Anytime there is in the future generations a person who needs help and is thinking of giving up, Eliezer will be there to employ his name for that person not to give up. Let me give you an example. A person is a product of his environment. Bar Minan, we wonder sometimes why we raise such good children at home, and yet after we send them off to school, they come back with vulgar language and they come back talking back to us, and we think, but I sent such a good boy to school. What happened? Why did he come back and he's not the same kid that I sent there? The answer is 9 out of 10 times because he surrounds himself with a bad crowd. How could it be that we're so protective in our homes about certain things? We would never let a child, chas v'shalom, be in a room at night with internet. But yet he has friends that their parents don't mind. There's no such thing in their houses as a filtered phone. It doesn't talk to them. They're more worried about physical harm than they are spiritual harm. They're going to make sure the child wears a helmet when he goes out to play on his bike. They're going to make sure that he does all these things in order to keep him safe. You can't go on a train at night. All these things to keep him safe physically. But spiritually, all of a sudden, it doesn't matter to them. I wonder about these parents. What do they think their children are doing in the room at 2 o'clock in the morning with internet on the computer? I guarantee you they're not reading Tikkun Hatzot. And I guarantee you they're not reading Zohar. They're not doing that at the room with the computer on. You know, they say that there's an Isur of Yichud. There's an Isur to be secluded with a woman inside a room. Our rabbis, our generation said that just like there's a Isur to be secluded with the women in the room, there's also an Isur to be secluded with the computer in the room. Exactly. And I'm thinking to myself, do these parents not care that they give their children unlimited access to internet with no filters on the phone, with no nothing, and they expect them to come back to their homes with the same children as they left? A person is a product of his environment. And therefore, when we surround ourselves with good people, we will become good people. When you have a chevra, when you go to shul, when everybody around you wants to get more religious, I guarantee you yourself, it's going to rub off and you're going to want to get more religious. But on the other hand, if you surround yourself with bad people, at the end of the day, you become a gangster just like them. And therefore, going back to the point, you have I remind you what we read a few weeks ago in the Parashat Shelach. You have 12 spies that Moshe Rabbeinu asks to go Latura to Aretz, to go tour the land, to spy out the land. And you have 80% of those spies, 10 spies out of the 12 are planning to give a bad report, planning to give a negative report. Comes Yoshua and Kalev, and they could come along and they could think to themselves, listen, at the end of the day, it's peer pressure. 10 out of the 12 spies are going to give a negative report, and they're afraid that their negative report is going to rub off on them. And says Kalev, how could I protect myself so I don't have Yeush? At the end of the day, Kalev was this close to giving up, saying, you know what, I don't need this. Peer pressure, they're gonna pressure me to give a bad report at the end of the day. So what happens? At that moment, when Kalev was this close to giving up, comes Eliezer and he gives him the support that he needs to say there's no such thing as giving up. At the end of the day, even if you feel peer pressure, even though you're surrounded by negative people and you're going to give a negative report, comes Eliezer and saves the day. If you look at source number 12, says that Rizal in Likutei Torah, Ki Eliezer ever Abraham nitgalgel bekalev ben Yifune. Came Eliezer, says Arizal, and he became a Gilgul. He had a spark of Eliezer neshama went inside the neshama of Kalev. Shelo chata ba'adat meraglim kemo. Exactly. Shelo chata ba'adat meraglim. So Kalev would not be affected by the aitzah of the meraglim. In fact, says the Arizal, if you look at the pasuk, says the pasuk, Kemo shene'emar va'avdi Kalev ekev hayta ruach acheret imo. That he decided to go a different route. Ruach acheret. The way that Arizal explains Ruach acheret, it means that he had a different spirit with him. At the end of the day, Kalev did not only have his neshama, he also had the neshama of Eliezer, helping him not to give up in this situation. When he felt the most despondent, when he felt the most in the situation, was being peer pressured to give up and commit Avirah, says Eliezer, I'm going to come, I'm going to help him. In this way, he's not going to commit an Avirah. Now, Rabutai, maybe this way we could explain why Moshe Rabbeinu named his son Eliezer. Because if you remember what happened in the Torah, Moshe Rabbeinu, he just got out of the palace, the first time being exposed to the Jewish people, even though he himself was Jewish. And all of a sudden he sees an Egyptian beating up on a Jew. Pasuk says, V'yifin kol v'cho, he looks both ways, v'yahad Mitzri, and he kills the Egyptian. And he didn't know that there were cameras that were watching him. The FBI was on his case right away. They put him up, they lock him up in jail. And Paro sentenced Moshe Rabbeinu death. They put his neck on the guillotine. Says Moshe Rabbeinu, at that moment, Moshe Rabbeinu could have said, listen, I give up. They're about to kill me. He looks around, Rabutai, Datan Aviram, please say Kaddish for me, and that's going to be the end of it. And all of a sudden, his neck becomes hard as a rock. The knife goes, and the knife ends up breaking on Moshe Rabbeinu's neck. And Moshe Rabbeinu ends up running away. What is the first thing Moshe Rabbeinu does when he runs away from Paro? He goes straight to Yitro, and he marries his wife Tzipporah. And the first child that they have, he names Eliezer. Ki Elohei avi be'ezri v'atzilenu mi'erev Paro. He named Eliezer after that episode that he was saved from the sword of Paro, because he tried to give him a permanent reminder. What got me through that situation? What got me through? What focused me to have emunah in Hashem, that I would not get killed by Paro? It was the emunah. It was the fact that I did not give up. The first thing he does is names his son Eliezer, because Eliezer is the begematria 318, which is one number more than Yeush, which is 317. Therefore, the first thing I'm going to do when I survive Paro is I'm going to name my son Eliezer. Eliezer, which represents Yeush and Yeush Klam. No such thing as giving up, no such thing as despondency. Based on this, Rabotai, we have to ask ourselves a question. Does our Tana, Rabbi Eliezer, that's quoted in the Mishnah in Masechet Parah, did he have the same characteristics of never to give up hope, to continue going even though when the stakes were very high, to continue even though when it seemed impossible? Well, if you look at Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer, in source number 13, it tells us a very interesting backstory on this Rabbi Eliezer ben Hurkanus. Says the Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer, Ma'aseh Rabbi Eliezer ben Hurkanus. What happened? Shayu la'avi chorshim. Eliezer ben Hurkanus, his father, he employed chorshim. He employed the people that would fix the plants, like the Mexicans that we see outside. V'ayu chorshim al gabei hama'ana. And these people were plowing on the ma'ana. That's a soft ground. And he was plowing on the very hard ground. Adama kasha. Yashav lo v'haya buche. So Eliezer, at this point, he began to cry. And his father asked him, why are you crying? Is it because I'm giving you too much work? Is it because you're plowing on very hard ground and you see the workers, they're plowing on soft ground? You could also plow on soft ground, there's no big deal. So Eliezer sits down on the ma'ana, on the soft ground, and again he's crying. Why are you crying? I gave you the easy job. Is it because you're complaining that you have to work at all? That's not the reason why I'm crying. So why are you crying? Because all I want to do is I want to learn. What are you talking about? You're 28 years old. 28 years old people, they don't begin to learn when they're 28. Usually you begin to learn when you're around 6 years old. You go start in yeshiva, Aleph Bet Gimel, so you begin to learn. At 28 years old, what do you think you're going to accomplish? His father tells him, I have a better itzah. Go get married, go to the Chabanim and have children. You send your children to yeshiva, and whatever Torah they learn will be to your credit. I don't want to do that. 2 weeks passed, and this Eliezer didn't eat anything. He fasted for 2 weeks. Until Eliyahu Nabi, he appeared to him. What happened? Amar lo, Ben Hurkanus, the son Hurkanus. Lama ta boche? Why are you crying? Amar lo, because I just want to learn. Amar lo, if that's what you want to do, if that's what you want to learn. Then my etzah is for you to go to Yerushalayim and learn Torah under the famous Rabbi, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. So he went. Amar v'halach etzah Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. Yashav lo v'haya boche. Again, he's sitting and he's crying. Amar lo, why are you crying? Amar lo, because I just want to learn. Amar lo, ben mi ata? Whose son are you? Lo higid lo. He didn't tell him. Amar lo, mi amecha? Lo lamadata kriyat shema, lo tefillah, lo birkat hamazon? Did you ever learn in your life how to pray? Kriyat shema, birkat hamazon, you know any of these things? Amar lo lav. I don't know any of these things. Amar lo, amod ve'amdecha shloshtan. I'm going to get up and I'm going to teach you all three. Yashav v'hu boche. Again, Eliezer is crying. Amar lo, beni, why are you crying? Amar lo, because I want to learn Torah. It's very nice that you told me how to pray. Very nice that you told me Kriyat Shema. Very nice that you told me Birkat Hamazon. But I want to learn. He told him 2 halachot, kol yemei hashavua, every single day. He would learn them every single day and he would just review them all day. Another 8 days passed and Eliezer didn't taste anything. Until his breath became so bad that Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, he smelled it and he became disgusted. He threw Eliezer out of the room. Again, Eliezer is crying. Amar lo, why are you crying? Amar lo, because you threw me out of the room as I'm a guy with chicken pox. You threw me out of the room. Amar lo beni, if that's the case, just like your breath became in front of me, so too the words of the Torah were going to flow out of your mouth. At the end of the day, Rabbi Eliezer ben Hurkanus, we know what happened. The moral of the story is that he learned non-stop and he became eventual Tana of the Mishnah. So Rabbi, my question is very simple. Again, Rabbi Eliezer, he had all the reason to give up. He had nothing going for him. At the end of the day, he's only 28 years old. Imagine if, as we go back to the Mexicans, as they're blowing the leaves off your front lawn, you come to them, you say, "Excuse me." He says, "Yes." He says, "Do you speak English?" He'll tell you, "Poquito. I speak a little bit in English." He says, "I think it's about time that you put down the mole and then go to Harvard and become a doctor. Go to become a doctor. No poquito English. It's too much already. That's too much to become a doctor in Harvard." That's what Rabbi Eliezer, that's what he accomplished. He had every single reason to give up. Every single reason to just, throw in the towel. Torah is not for me. But at the end of the day, he pushed. And maybe you could say, and maybe I'll throw in my 2 cents over here, that maybe he had a great influence from his counterpart, Rabbi Akiva. At the end of the day, Rabbi Eliezer was only 28 years old. And Rabbi Akiva was 40 years old. In fact, I worked it out today. If you take the gematria of Akiva, we can do it together. Ayin, that's 70. Kof, that's 100. That's 170. Okay. Yud, that's 180. That's 180. Exactly. That's 10. And Bet and Aleph, that is another 2. That's another 3. So 183 altogether. 183. Bogalit is also. I will tie 318, exactly. So 318, that's the exact gematria of Eliezer. So Eliezer and Akiva, their gematrias match if you boggle up Akiva. So therefore, maybe Eliezer, he decided to employ his name as Eliezer to say that at the end of the day, even though I have all the reasons to give up, even though there's no reason for me to continue, even though I'm considered a bum who doesn't know Torah, if I push myself and I continue going, Hashem will give me the siyata d'shmaya, and eventually he became Rabbi Eliezer the Tana. And with this, Rabbi, we could explain. If you go back to Rabbi Eliezer's Shita, in the Shita, again, we'll go slow over here, just hold focus for a minute. His opinion in the Mishnah was that the minimum age for a para aduma is how old? Is 2 years old. And the Chachamim said, no, minimum age is at least 3 or 4 for a para aduma in order to be burnt. What is the reason why we have the mitzvah para aduma? What is the reason? I know that it's a chok, but what did Hashem hope to accomplish by bringing the mitzvah para aduma into our lives? Well, don't guess, Rabotai. It's actually a Rashi. In source number 14 says Rashi, Omer Rabbi Moshe Darshan, Ta'am al Chukat hapara. What's the reason why we have this mitzvah para duma? Shihi kapara al cheta egel. Because para duma is supposed to bring us kapara for the golden calf. And Rashi brings a mashal. What's the mashal? Mashal leben shivcha shitinef piltan shel melech. A mashal that, let's say you had a king, and the king had a palace, and you had one of the maidservants of the king, and the child of the maidservant had an accident on the floor of the king's palace. So what does the king say? Says Rashi, Amru tavo imo v'tekanech b'tzo'ah. Bring the mother of this child and let the mother clean up the accident of the child. Kach tavo para v'techaper ala egel. So too, the para, which is the para aduma, which is the red heifer, let the red heifer bring kapara on its child, which is an egel. Again, an egel is a baby calf. Para is the mother. So let the para aduma come bring kapara on the baby calf, which is the chayte egel. Is the correlation between the two clear? Now, listen as follows. We'll go slow. According to Rabbi Eliezer, how old does the para aduma have to be? 2 years old, exactly. The problem is with Rabbi Eliezer is that a para aduma that's 2 years old, it doesn't have the ability to give birth. It's too young to give birth. Therefore, if you want to tell me that the correlation between para aduma and chayta egel is the mother comes and brings kapara on the child, well, according to Rabbi Eliezer, it doesn't make sense because the mother is not old enough to have a child. But according to the Hachamim, they say the mother is how old? At least 3 or 4. And a 3 or 4 para is old enough to give birth to a egel. Therefore, the mashal that Rashi brought down fits like the shita of the Hachamim. Rabbis, you want to come along, you would tell me the minimum age for a para is 3 or 4 years old. Para that's 3 or 4 years old has the ability to give birth. Therefore, it has the ability to give birth. It's going to come bring kapara on its child. But according to Rabbi Eliezer, 2 years old is not good enough to give kapara. Therefore, the mashal, Rabbi Eliezer doesn't fit with the mashal of Rashi. What's going on? Now my question, Rabbi Tai, this is a question of the Hatam Sofer. Look at source number 15. It says Hatam Sofer. Kitam. Right, this whole time of Rashi only fits in with the Rabbi Shita. Ki para hi bat shlosha umala, a cow that's 3 years old and older. She'az hi ruya leholid. Only that case it has the ability to give birth. Only when a para is at least 3 years old, then the svara, the logic, the mashal of let the mother come and clean the baby, it fits. A para is only 2 years old, then it cannot give birth. It's impossible to say that the para is coming to kapara hayta egel, doesn't fit. So how does Rabbi Eliezer make sense? Is the question clear according to Hatam Sofer? He explains as follows. He bases it on a Gemara in Avodah Zarah. Says the Gemara in Avodah Zarah, number 16, source number 16. Amar Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi, Lo asu Yisrael et ha'egel ela litein pitchon peh leba'alei teshuvah. You're right, the truth is, Rabutai, the Hayta Egel wasn't really supposed to happen. And it wasn't because the Jewish people, it wasn't because of the Yetzer Hara. The whole reason why the Hayta Egel happened is Hashem made the Jewish people worship the Egel on purpose. Why in the world would he do that? He did that in order to give a pitchon peh, a claim to those Risha'im that are going to come along and at the end of time, whatever it is, and they're going to come along, they're going to say, Hashem, we're too deep into our averot to do teshuvah. Comes Hashem and he's going to tell you, yeah, were you worse than the Jewish people in the Midbar that worshipped Avodah Zarah and I still forgave them? So the whole reason why Hashem made the Jewish people worship the Egel was only to give a claim to those people who say that teshuvah is not for them, teshuvah doesn't work. Says the Gemara, says Rashi, Kilomar, Giburim, Vishalitim, Biyitzram Hayu. The truth is that the Jewish people at the time of the Midbar, they were Giburim. They were strong, they had much more power over the Yetzer Hara. They weren't befitting for the Yetzer Hara to give the best of them in order to bow down to the Egla Arufa, to the Hayta Egel. Also, why did it happen? It says Rashi, Ela gezerat melech hayta lishot bam. It was the decree of the king. That's it. You cannot fight the decree of the king. At the end of the day, if Hashem wants something to happen, even though it seems to be bad, it's going to happen. We can't do anything about it. Kedei litein pitchon peh lebalei teshuvah she'im yomar hachoteh. If a guy is going to come along and he's going to say, Lo ashuv shelo yikableni, I can't do teshuvah, Hashem won't accept me. Omrim lo, they're going to tell him, go learn from the Maaseh Egel. Shikaperu v'nitkablu b'teshuvah. At the end of the day, Hashem did accept the ta'ana, the teshuvah of the Jewish people. Therefore, anybody who thinks they've done worse than Chayta Egel, it's not true. Hashem forgave them, He can forgive you too. And therefore, according to this, Rabutai, according to this reason, Chayta Egel, you're right. The truth is, the Jewish people, we didn't need kapara for the Egel. We didn't need kapara. We didn't do it on purpose. Hashem forced us to do it. Therefore, Lefi Shitat Rabbi Eliezer, he says that a para aduma has to be 2 years old. It fits because there's no mashal over here. There's no mother coming to clean up after the child. You don't need it. At the end of the day, why Hashem made us worship the Egels? Because He wanted it to give pitchon peh to the Balak Teshuvah. Says Rabbi Friedman in Shvili Pinchas, source number 17. Lefi Zeh Yesh Lomar Ki Mitam Zeh Sover Rabbi Eliezer, Shitziva HaKadosh Baruch Hu Le'avi, B'kavanat Techila Para Aduma Bat Shinatayim. Specifically, the para has to be 2 years old. She'enu Ruya Lo Li, that cannot give birth. Kedei Shenichsha Le'avi. A person can make a mistake and think, Mizeh, Shechita Ha'eg, Shechet Egel Lo Haya Chet Mitzad Yitzram Shel Yisrael. A person shouldn't make a mistake and think the reason why the Jewish people worship the Egel is because a defect in them. If that was the case, that we needed kapara for the egel, then halacha would be you have to bring at least a 3-year-old to bring kapara because the mother has to clean back to the child. However, it's possible to bring teshuvah even on a cardinal sin of avodah zarah. שהיא חמורה שבעבירות, לפי שאמור מטעם זה הוא סובר כי פרה אדומה לא בא לכפר על חטא העגל. פרה אדומה is not coming to give forgiveness on the העגל, שהיה גזרת מלך, אלא להורות תשובה לרבים. It's coming to tell them that no matter how much a person sinned, no matter how big of a hole a person thinks that he dug himself in, at the end of the day, he could always get out of the hole. Because if Bnei Yisrael were forgiven for Hayta Egel, no matter what we do in our lives, Hashem can forgive us for whatever we do. Therefore says Rabbi Friedman in the second paragraph, Kevan shebar lidei kach, hinei ma tov mana'im lahavin, bazeh, ma shepatach Rabbeinu HaKadosh et Mishnah HaRishon b'Torah she'ba'al peh. Why this specific? We asked one of the questions, why did Rabbi, the redactor of the Mishnah, specifically bring Rabbi Eliezer as the first rabbi in the Mishnah, in Mishnah Barachot, in order to tell us, says Rabbi Friedman, because a foundation of when it comes to learning Torah is because the first thing we do a lot of times when a person begins to learn, right away he wants to give up. He says, you know what, this is too difficult for me. I can't do it. In yeshiva it's too hard, now that I'm adult it's too hard. Learning is not for me. That's exactly what the Yetzirah wants you to think. And therefore, what did Rabbi do? He dafka chose Rabbi Eliezer, who is the paradigm of not to give up. He was 28 years old when he began to learn. He became a Tana of the Gemara. So that's why Rabbi, the redactor of the Mishnah, dafka chose Rabbi Eliezer as the first example, the first opinion in the Mishnah of all the Shas. He specifically chose Rabbi Eliezer to show you that when a person sits down, he decides to learn. He looks at the Gemara, he says, you know what? It's too much. And he looks how many pages he has to follow. Gemara Barachot, Baba Kama Shabbat. It's too much for me to learn. No, I dafka choose Rabbi Eliezer as the first Tana in the Mishnah to tell you that just like Rabbi Eliezer overcame his Yetzirah of Yeush, he didn't give up because Yeush is 317, Eliezer is 318, one more than Yeush. Then therefore Eliezer gives you the power to continue to learn no matter what happens. Therefore it says Rabbi Friedman, Torah he gedolah midai. Person can say the Torah is too big. Whether it's big in quantity or in quality. A person, he thinks to himself, I can never learn, I can never even begin learning because Torah learning is too much. Therefore, at that point when that happens, we have to employ our own Eliezers. We have to employ our own power of never giving up on something to push ourselves at that moment when the Yetzirah is trying to bog us down to say, you know what, learning is not for you. Learning is too much. You don't know how to learn. You were not born in this country. You were not born in this state. You were not born in a religious family. Doesn't matter. We come in and we employ our Eliezers, our 318s, our one power over Yeush, and we come along and say, no matter what happens, we're going to continue learning. Therefore, based on this, says Rabbi Friedman, last paragraph, what did Shlomo Melech say in Kohelet? Leiv chacham lemino, a person's heart is on the right, the leiv kisi l'smolo, and the heart of a fool is on the left. What does that mean? Says Rabbi Friedman, umuvuar b'sfarim hakedoshim beperush al kach ki kasher adam matkil lilmod lemashal gemara mitoch hasefer. When a person just begins to sit down and learn, he opens up a Gemara for the very first time, and he sees, wow, this Gemara has a lot of pages. He opens up Baba Kama, he opens up Baba Baratar, he sees the tons of pages in this Gemara. He has two choices. He could either look to the left and he could see how much pages he has and therefore it's too much for me to accomplish, therefore he can give up. Or he could look to the right and see how many pages he accomplished. Which way will he look? If he looks to the right and see, listen, Baruch Hashem, I finished the daf. Baruch Hashem, I finished another line. Baruch Hashem, I finished another paragraph. I got to the next Mishnah. He looks to the right, Leiv Chacham. His heart is considered Chacham because this will cause him to continue learning more. However, if he goes ahead and he looks to the left, Leiv Kisili Smolo. The Leiv of the fool is on the left side because he's going to look and say, look how many pages is ahead of me. Says Rabbi Friedman, Sham Nikol Hevdel Ben Chacham Lekasi. When a person sits down to learn, that's where it's recognizable. When a person is a Chacham, where he's a smart, whether he's a Kasir, whether he's a fool. Ki Chacham Mistakel Tamid Biyamin HaSefer. The Chacham always looks towards the right of the book. How many pages did I already finish? That's considered an accomplishment. That's a person who's Chacham. That's a person who's smart. Another day, another page. I'm making progress. However, it's going to give him more power to learn. On the other side, on the other side, if you look to the left, that's a fool. That guy's always looking on the left side of the book, and he sees, wow, how many pages do I have left? How many pages do I have yet to learn? He decides, you know what, it's not for me, I'm just going to give up. Because that person cannot learn so many books. That's why Shlomo Melech says, Lev hacham limino. Guy looks to the right, what he accomplished, he's chacham. Guy looks to the small, however, to the left, and this guy is no good. And that's why we can answer the very first question we began this year with: why does Hashem specifically quote the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer over the rabbis? At the end of the day, Rambam was supposed to take like the rabbis. Why is Hashem quoting the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer in order to tell me that Eliezer, his name gives me a lesson? His name is Ein Yeush Klal. Eliezer is given after 3:18. That's one more over Yeush. A person should never give him no matter what situation he's in, whether it's a situation in business, whether it's a situation with Shalom with the situation in learning, a person can never give up hope, because the moment he gives up hope, that's exactly what the Yetzer Hara wants. You know, one time there's a famous story of Moshe Feinstein that there was a Baal Teshuvah that said, you know what, I want to learn Gemara with my father. His father wasn't religious. He said, I'm going to learn with my father, and it took him a year to finish one daf, or maybe it was even one amud, even less. And the father said, okay, you know, let's make a siyum. I always you talk about your siyumim, and he tells him, Dad, to be honest, you only make a siyum over an entire mesechet, not over a daf. So he decided, no, I'm going to ask Moshe Feinstein. He asked him Moshe Feinstein, not only could you make the siyum, I'm going to come. Because at the end of the day, one daf is one huge accomplishment. That man could have said, listen, I'm not religious, therefore learning Gemara is not for me. And at the end of the day, he could have died and not learned anything in his life. He's saying, you know what, I'm going to push. In that one daf, even one small line, there's no such thing of Ein Yeush Klal. Shabbat Shalom. Amen.